everyone. So my name is Katie. For anyone who doesn't know, hopefully you guys have a general idea. But I did my presentation on American culture versus Alcoholics Anonymous culture in America, and how they communicate with themselves and others. So the first thing that I wanted to mention is that, as we already talked about in class, the definition of culture, what defines something as a culture. So culture is shared assumptions, values, and beliefs of a group of people which result in characteristic behaviors. So a group that shares things that are not tangible, are not visible, shared assumptions, values, beliefs, and they reflect things that are visible. Because I believe this, I act this way. And Alcoholics Anonymous is because I believe that alcohol and I don't mix, I decide to be sober. That's just one general example, but there are many, many examples, which I touch on some of them, that really support this cause and effect relationship that defines a culture. So one of the main things I also think that defines Alcoholics Anonymous as a culture is the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. So what they are, they're just laws kind of that govern how a meeting is run, what meetings do. I was just in a meeting the other day, and we were speaking about tradition 4, which is each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. And we really talked about how this leaves a lot of room for a meeting to really have its own personality, really have its own thing going on. So, what this means is that, one of the things that I found really interesting in my research is that each AA meeting almost has its own culture. Like there's a culture of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then there's a micro culture within the meetings. And this is really allowed by the fourth tradition. That really defines it as a culture. And the thing that the fourth tradition allows is for each meeting to be different, and therefore, each meeting values something differently, whether they value the traditions or they value the steps or they value topics, whatever they choose to discuss on influences how people act in their lives. The people that go to those meetings bring certain things over into society that other people don't. People in American society don't have the opportunity necessarily to bring that direct correlation over from a meeting. So that shared value really allows, really correlates with someone's behavior, visible behavior. The shared value of this meeting the Alcoholics Anonymous influences how people behave. They don't drink, they bring the principles over. And just a lot of these other traditions also govern how this culture functions, what a meeting can and cannot do. Just some facts about Alcoholics Anonymous, because most people have no idea what it is. They think it's a church organization, or they think it's a cult or whatever. Just some stuff. So Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience and strength and hope to solve their common problem and recover from alcoholism. It has more than 2.4 million members. 1.2 members are outside of the United States, so this is not something that is a microculture of America. This is really a culture within itself. I can go over to Japan and find a meeting. Sure, it's going to function a little bit differently than the meetings here in America, but that's why I focused on Alcoholics Anonymous in America versus American culture. And just this, I found this online. I thought it was really neat, just to give some ideas. It's a little PowerPoint that someone else made about Alcoholics Anonymous, and it has 113,000 groups within the world. 85.1% of them are white. It has the difference between male and female, what their marital status is, age of the members, what they do for a living. And the success rate, which I thought was fun, the average sobriety of members is more than 8 years sober. And just some other stuff about Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought it was interesting to bring this up because this is what you see when you think of a culture. Who are members of this culture? And here they are. They're mostly white. They're more men than females. Most of them are married. They're about half and half on who's married and who's not, and so forth. So the first thing I want to bring up is the communication, the general communication of Alcoholics Anonymous versus America. So the Johari window looks a little bit different. I built this one based on what I found out about Alcoholics Anonymous, but the open free area is much bigger than the hidden area versus the very linear American Johari window. The blind area is a bit bigger, and the unknown area is much smaller because you are sharing so much with other people that there's not a lot that you don't know, and something that you don't know could easily be pointed out by someone else because you're so open and willing to what other people have to say. So there's some general things about the communication. So it's open and intimate. Gossip never includes vulnerable information. So unlike American culture and how friendships work in America, I'm typically Americans are very willing to share, with their best friends something bad about someone else in their friend group. I'm going to tell Lisa that Brad and Lisa, or I'm going to tell Kelly that Brad and Lisa hooked up, and so forth. Those types of things do not go around the rooms. If it is vulnerable information, we keep it to ourselves. And I think that's because there's this very general level of respect in Alcoholics Anonymous. There is no judgment about who walks into that room. Unlike in America, we tend to be a very judgmental society and culture. I walk into the Burberry store and I don't get talked to because I don't have enough money, and that doesn't happen. It doesn't matter if you are a multimillionaire businessman or if you're someone off the streets. When you walk into the room, we are more than happy to talk to you. The open and free area is huge. And then the language of Alcoholics Anonymous is quite a bit different than the language of a typical American. We use the same words, but they have different meanings. So words like inventory and love and God all mean different things within the rooms than they do out in society. It's interesting because we can pick up on things. I'm in the line in the grocery store and I'll hear someone talking about inventory, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're definitely a part of the rooms. And, we don't typically, I've never approached that person because I don't want to break an animosity, but that's something that's interesting that we can do that. It's a functioning, it's the shared behavior that we have. And the next thing I looked into was collectivistic versus individualistic. So AA versus American. So AA, we do not want to recognize our members. It's anonymous for one thing. I don't want to know your last name. I don't want to know where you work. Those are not things that are meant for me to know. And also, one of the main things that really defines it is that in AA, it's really looked down upon to be recognized for the things that you do. If you make the coffee, you don't stand up and tell everyone you made the coffee. If you set up the chairs, if you went out and shared your story at a treatment center, that's not something that you share with everyone and tell and gloat about. That's really looked down upon. They emphasize doing service for the pure reason of doing service, not to be acknowledged for it. And, and that's not necessarily the way of the Americans. We love to be recognized for the things that we do. If I made the coffee, I'm going to definitely let some people know that I made the coffee because that's, what we do here in America. And then they're saying it's a we program. I wouldn't be here without these people. We need to do it together. We function as a whole. And America is, you're fend for yourself. You do your thing and I'll do my thing, and if you need help, I might help you. No, in AA, it is very we-oriented. We share one main thought and goal. We all share the goal of sobriety. We share the goal of Polychronic versus monochronic. I found that AA is definitely polychronic and American is, as we've already talked about, monochronic. Some of the things in AA that defines it as polychronic is there's always a meeting. You can walk in anywhere and there's going to be a meeting going on and you're more than welcome to walk into it and smack in the middle of it. I wouldn't say that AA is fully like polychronic as in it's meeting is scheduled for 3 and you're going to show up at 8 expecting to go to the same meeting. There's some scheduling going on in there, but it's very open. Unlike Americans, which are scheduled, it's 8 o'clock, that means 8 o'clock, you go, and there forth. You can always find someone to work with. It's not just the slotted times. There's always someone there. There's always a meeting to go to. And there's a saying that you can never be late to an AA meeting. And unlike the American saying, which is 5 minutes early is on time, you can walk in 5 minutes late, no one's going to blink an eye. And it's expected almost that you come in late. No one cares. And, if you come in late to an interview, you're out. You're done for. One of the most clear differences is the external versus internal locus of control. And in AA, it is to let go of all control. That's one of the main goals. And, in the first step, I'm powerless over alcohol. My life has become unmanageable. I cannot manage my own life, and I'm powerless. Step 3 is made a decision to turn our will and lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. That means I'm literally going to turn everything I have over to something else, something, bigger than myself, some divine whatever. It can, as long as it's not you. That's what they say in the rooms. It can be a doorknob, just as long as it isn't you, which is the direct opposite of the American, which is that if you keep trying and you work hard, you will be successful. AA, if you keep trying and you work hard, you will fail. You'll be drunk again, because this is not something that you are capable of doing. And another saying in AA that I thought was interesting is just quit playing God. So common to hear in the rooms. Quit playing God. You don't have the power. You don't have the power to control the outcomes of your life. That's what quit playing God means. Really interesting is the human difference in the view of human nature. In AA, you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent. So you walk into those rooms and you're guilty. And everybody knows that you're an alcoholic, you've made mistakes in your life, something's wrong, you have done something that's gotten you into the rooms. Therefore, you're guilty, and you need to prove yourself to society. Prove yourself that you are worthy of forgiveness from other people. And there's a whole process how to go about that, but and worthy to the group, and worthy, to yourself. You need to prove to yourself that you're worthy, and that, and the American is the direct opposite. I know this is a court term, and I'm not really discussing it as a court term, but it's innocent until proven guilty, and that is not what happens when you walk into an AA room. You're not innocent, and you're not going to prove yourself guilty. You're guilty, and you're going to prove yourself innocent. And the other thing with AA is we don't look to find they don't look to find when someone went wrong. There's no where did you go wrong, like what happened to make you start drinking, and that doesn't exist at all. And a lot of people, I think that's a common misconception, that someone started drinking because they were in an abusive relationship, because their parents were abusive, because they were sexually abused, because, they had a crummy childhood, because they're a bad person, and none of that exists. And then in America, you need to figure out where someone went wrong. And I hear that all the time. I'm asked, probably it's one of the most common questions I'm asked is, why did you start drinking? There's no answer to that. I can feed you a lot of circumstances in my life that you might qualify as, okay, that's where she went wrong, but that doesn't really exist. There's plenty of people that have really beautiful childhoods and beautiful lives that are alcoholics. So we don't try and discover where someone went wrong. We just accept the fact that they're an alcoholic and continue on. And lastly is the constant adaptation that members of the Alcoholics Anonymous culture go through. It's back and forth. And there's like a dual citizenship between the American culture and Alcoholics Anonymous culture. When you're in the room, you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but some of that stuff does carry over into the American culture, and it's deciding what is appropriate to bring with me, what's not appropriate, what to leave behind and what not to leave behind. And, I just think it's really interesting that, there are people all across the world that are members of multiple cultures. It's a very fine line, because the AA culture has some influence. The AA culture in America definitely has influence of the American culture, but it's still different. It still holds these qualities that really define it to be a different culture than the American culture. And where, someone like myself, a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, do I draw the line? What comes and what goes, how do I talk to people? And it's just really interesting. And with that, I'd say that hopefully my presentation allowed you to get some insight on on Alcoholics Anonymous, and also just how we communicate, how alcoholics communicate, and really realize that alcoholics, although the meetings are a different culture and what happens within alcoholics, so we're no different from someone else. I talk the same, I act the same. I'm still a student at Century College. I still do my homework. Sometimes I skip class. Like, all that stuff is exactly the same. The difference is I choose not to drink in my life, and whatever is behind that, well, the reason I chose not to drink in my life is my business, and that's something that I choose to leave in that culture. But then again, typically people who are willing to share with you that they're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous are willing to answer questions. It's one of the big things that I recommend is ask someone, not, oh, why are you an alcoholic? But ask someone like, that's cool. What's it like? What are meetings like? That's their, a lot. Um, you know, don't be afraid of alcoholics. Because they once made poor decisions does not mean that they're going to make poor decisions now. And because they're different from you in that aspect of your life doesn't mean that they're any different from you in any other aspect of your life. Because we do have this dual citizenship, because I know how to communicate in that culture, but I also know how to communicate in this culture. I know how to function there, but I also know how to function here. So yeah, that would definitely be my big thing that I learned from this, is that we go back and forth, and I used to think I was really weird and different because I was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That made me special in some way, or unique from someone else in American society, and that's just not the truth. Thank you.